Okay, we've got 30 minutes. We're going to do this bill. Everything worked out fine. Senator, we're ready for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Senator Pa, begin, and testifiers, if the person before you gave what your remarks are, and if you could limit them to 1.5 minutes, that'd be so helpful to everybody here today and under the circumstances. And thank you, Senator Powell, for helping out one of our colleagues and when she's having not a perfect day. So thank you for stepping up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today regarding my bill SF 1273, the READ Act. We do have an author's amendment A1 to present.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept A1 amendment.
All those in favor of the author's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. The READ Act is an effort to take what we know about research, human development, and cognitive science on how people learn to read and apply it to meaningful public policy. The goal is to support our districts and improve literacy rates in the state of Minnesota to help every child to have the opportunity to read well. Before you are slides that I have provided titled the READ Act. That details a legislative history over the past 22 years. Many thanks to the House Legislative Library for their work in compiling this information for members so that you have that in context. You should also have a handout with MCA reading scores that show our literacy rates, detailing that only about 50% of Minnesota students are reading at grade level. We absolutely can and must do better. I want to be clear that most people in this field will tell you that MCAs are not a great measure of how well a child reads. But that is how we report and look at them now in our state. The READ Act seeks to find a better path. Our goal is to continue to work on the language so that the final bill will have broad support and can help all of our districts. I do have some testifiers today, and I'm open for questions or comments after.
Thank you, Senator. So if we could get the testifiers going, like just come on up. We have a list. 3 at a time or 2 at a time would be wonderful. And again, and I know you've worked really hard on your remarks, but if you could make them less than 2 minutes each. And listen for the sound of the ringing bell that will be on the speakers. Thank you. Just begin testifying. Identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Maria Roberts, and I'm the principal at Wilshire Park Elementary School in the St. Anthony New Brighton School District. It's an honor to testify before you today in support of the READ Act. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I've been working in Minnesota Public Schools for over 20 years, and as our data repeatedly shows, our educational system has not met the literacy needs of an alarming number of students. We must stop accepting these outcomes. I started my career as a special education teacher. In college, I was taught how to teach art and music, not how to teach reading. Today, when I ask teachers how they learned to teach reading, the majority of them say they also were not adequately prepared. Schools have historically given teachers the what to teach. We give them books and manuals to implement, but we haven't always honored their professionalism by providing them opportunities to learn the how and why to teach evidence-based reading instruction. We can do better by providing both the time and money it takes to help teachers learn evidence-based practices, unlearn the practices and beliefs that are not serving our students, and provide coaching for effective instruction and assessment. We stop treating teachers simply as implementers and instead treat them as they are, educators. Unfortunately, evidence-based reading instruction is often only delivered in special education and intervention classrooms. These classrooms are disproportionately filled with our students of color. By implementing evidence-based reading practices into Tier 1 general education instruction, we may actually help reduce this disproportionality. Here's what's most exciting for me to share with you today. Since we've begun to provide professional development and purchased a curriculum aligned with the science of reading, we see classrooms filled with joy. Kids are learning to read and they are proud. Pride breeds joy. Teachers are not only continuing to connect learning to a student's world, they are teaching them the skills to effectively navigate their world. It is our moral obligation to support students toward understanding their individual purpose and to become independent learners. In order to do that, they must be able to read. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Kate Scapel. I'm an elementary curriculum coordinator for School District 197. Over the last 20 years, I've taught in multiple levels from preschool through grade 3. I've spent the last 10 years of my career developing curriculum in all content areas, including reading. When I was working in my undergraduate degree, I was taught about teaching phonics, reading comprehension, and writing. But when I got to my dream job of teaching first grade, I was teaching a small group guided reading lesson, and the reading specialist at my school was there to support me. As I was working with a child to decode or sound out a word, she stopped me in the middle of the lesson and told me, "We don't sound out words. We use what we call cueing strategies." And only one of those strategies involved having children recognize a sound and then read the word. I was confused, but I did what I was told and was trained to do. This was a model that was widespread across school districts across the country. It was all about the joy of reading. We were teaching letters, sounds, and word chunks, but not really letting kids use and apply them when they were actually reading. In 2018, after attending the MTSS conference with Dr. Kim Gibbons from the University of Minnesota, my district went to a model of screening students 3 times a year using FastBridge. When we did this screening, we were able to unveil some things that we needed and some work we needed to do around encoding and decoding words. We were able to move to a teaching resources that teach children structured literacy. This implementation is still developing as it began in the height of the pandemic, but we are headed in the right direction. Based on the experiences of my school district, I feel the greatest need is training and materials that support a thorough reading program that includes the systematic of instruction of phonics and phonemic awareness, in addition to fluency, reading comprehension, word study, and course writing. This bill would provide districts access to funds that will allow them to provide this for their students. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kulia Pringle, and I'm the Minnesota State Director for the National Parents Union. I'm here in support of Senate File 1273, the READ Act. At the National Parents Union, we provide one-on-one support to Minnesota families as they navigate the pre-K through 12th grade education system. I also co-founded a homework help program at Jimmy Lee JK Movement Recreation Center. I see firsthand as I stand alongside families the frustration, depression, and the overwhelmingly feeling of disappointment as families realize their children are not where they need to be when it comes to reading. The fact is just 30% of eighth grade students in Minnesota performed at or above proficient on the NEAT. This means 7 out of 10 of our 8th grade students who have little over 4 years left of public education career are not ready or on grade level. We owe them more. We owe them by adopting explicit strategies to ensure that we are using strong research-based curriculum. We owe them high-quality ongoing professional development for our teachers. And we owe them the ability to continuously monitor and improve their progress. I believe the READ Act accomplishes these things for our kids. I coined the phrase called read or die, or reading to live. I'm going to read a poem from one of my former students which conveys the phrase. My hand was raised, you looked at me and turned the other way. Little did I know I wasn't having a good day. So I screamed, I threw my paper and my pencil on the ground. I got kicked out from then on. School to school, I moved around. Now I'm 17, the school thing isn't really for me. The streets are more appealing. Till we got caught in court. The cop said that he felt threatened. I'm on t-shirts with clouds and that looked like heaven. The look on everyone's face, I hate to see them all so down. I watched my mom scream as they put me in the ground. If only I'd known my life I would plead. To think that all this happened because I couldn't read. Thank you.
I'm sorry, my name is Barb Dufferin, and I think it's my turn, but I'm not sure.
Go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank
my
you.
mic was off.
Chair
I apologize.
Swedinski and members of the committee, my name is Barb Dufferin, Superintendent of Matamidi Public Schools. Thank you for your commitment to improving literacy outcomes for all of our students in Minnesota. In Matamidi, we share that commitment. I'm here to support the READ Act and want to emphasize to you that implementing the science of reading is a big lift, not simply a training conducted by one person. Over the past few years at Matamidi, we have put considerable time and resources toward letters training. And at the end of this year, after 80 hours of work for each participant, we have trained all of our K-2 classroom teachers and many of our district special education and reading intervention teachers. Additionally, we have a leadership team to oversee the implementation of the principles of a scientifically based literacy program, as well as the de-implementation of practices and resources that are not evidence-based. The team will provide leadership in auditing curriculum resources, determine literacy background priorities for future hires, identify additional training needs, monitor rollouts of new resources, and analyze data to identify future needs. As you move forward, I ask that you resist any overly prescriptive language that names specific positions and roles which may not align with how we choose to implement changes in our literacy program. Again, thank you for supporting evidence-based literacy programs. The requirements that are outlined currently are one way to move a system change forward. I encourage you to refine the language to include more flexibility in the way a district can meet the intent of such a critical change. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, I'm Dr. Lucy Payne, a Matamidi School Board member and faculty member in teacher preparation at the University of St. Thomas. The teaching of reading and the need to improve reading outcomes for all students is a complex issue. There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer or one thing that needs to be addressed. The system needs improvement. The system must change. The READ Act approaches literacy improvement from a systems perspective. This bill involves many of the key stakeholders. The language of this bill needs to continue to evolve and should continue to hold high standards for all students while allowing flexibility for districts to be responsive to their unique context. I appreciate the ideas and concepts in this bill. Experience tells us that we need what is included in the bill and more. Professional development of teachers, building leadership, and paraprofessionals needs to happen over time. A one-time or short experience isn't going to make the changes we need. Teachers need ongoing coaching and support. These ideas need long-term funding for implementation that will lead to a change in outcome for students. The way the bill is currently written, there isn't support for districts and teachers with adequate funding and ongoing coaching for the system to change. I fully agree with the urgency of changing practices. As a district that has begun this process, we want to ensure that urgency does not lead to poor implementation for the sake of moving quickly. In order to see the change we desire in outcomes, we need to acknowledge that learning to read and comprehend text is a complex process that takes time. In closing, I would like to, again, state my support for the ideas and outcomes in this bill and its systems approach to the urgent need to support Minnesota students in literacy. I hope the bill language continues to be refined to address the different school districts and contexts and long-term nature of the solution. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Senator, thank you, members of committee. My name is Dr. Killian, and it is my pleasure to speak today on behalf of the 86,000 members of Education Minnesota. We're here today to speak in favor of Senate File 1273, also known as the READ Act. Before we give you just two of our concerns that we just wanted to flag, we did want to say that we wanted to remind everyone we are here today because of a structural problem. We are here today because of a structural problem you all have a very unique opportunity to fix. The best curriculum, the best screeners, and the best interventions will mean nothing if we do not fully fund our schools and fully staff our schools and repair the teaching profession. No one can implement the great stuff that's in the READ Act if we don't have anybody in the building doing the work. a lot of great things in this bill, but one thing that we wanted to flag is the personalized learning plan language that is still ongoing and is still being talked about as this bill moves through its various forms. But we want to make sure and caution members of the committee, every time you place more paperwork on teachers, you decrease their time to spend with students, and you decrease their ability to focus on their lesson plans and crafting the interventions that they plan to do in real time with students. There's no question that scholars working within the science of reading have revolutionized reading instruction. We are very thankful, though, that the bill's language now reads science of reading or evidence-based, but because we know there are certain populations of protected students that need more than just a science of reading approach. So with that, we stand in favor, and we've been very happy to work with the coalition in both the House and the Senate that's working on this bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Wendy Stitchen, the Associate Director of Literacy at the Center for Applied Research and Educational Improvement at the University of Minnesota, which houses the Minnesota Center for Reading Research. I'm here today to talk about literacy work that we've been doing in partnership with MDE. This work is directly related to the READ Act bill. After 4 years into this project, we are now co-leading the work across several districts and schools within 2 regions in Minnesota. We started with training, and now we're sustaining changes in teachers' instructional practices and in managing systems change. So let's talk about what does this look like in practice. In year 1, we focused on training teachers. Mid-year, we realized our instructional materials would not enable the teachers to apply their learning to daily phonics instruction. We built new instructional materials that supported teachers in instructing students as their training intended. We spent 3 years improving those instructional materials that now follow the training and mirror what is measured and coached. This year, districts are refining their instructional routines around vocabulary, comprehension, and writing. We will be continuing the process of monitoring instruction and the use of instructional materials to ensure that improvements to resources follow both training and research. Most recently, classroom observations confirm that staff need ongoing support to make, adapt, and sustain changes in practice. Highly effective instructional coaches increase teachers' confidence when they provide feedback, model routines, and support new instructional habits. Instruction is improving. Teachers are excited to see growth in students' confidence in mastery of foundational reading skills. When changes in instruction are system-wide, we will see increase in sustained literacy outcomes. Teachers need consistent and ongoing training. Instructional resources align to the evidence-based practices, coaching to transfer and integrate those practices, and administrators to make policies that enable sustained and continuous support. We must provide implementation support at all levels: classroom, grade, building, region, and state. CARI and MDE have already been doing this work collaboratively, but we have limited capacity without additional resources. We look forward to expanding our partnership with your support. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the READ Act bill.
Next testifier's online as well. Nafisa?
Thank you. I couldn't find the list. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee and guests. My name is Nafisa Muhammad, and I'm a high school English teacher taking a time out. I'm on a mental health break because after 8 years of teaching and going on strike, I took all that I could take. I now support teachers who are fighting for just and equitable teaching and learning experiences as Deputy Director of Educators for Excellence Minnesota. I am in strong support of Senate File 1273. As an experienced English language arts teacher, I know how hopeless many secondary content teachers feel when students arrive to their classroom not knowing how to read or lacking the confidence needed to attack the text, resulting in losing in motivation to learn and losing the need to stay in school. There's a saying in secondary literacy education that by the time the youth reach middle and high school, they should be reading to learn, not learning to read. Thus, secondary content teachers aren't taught to be reading teachers. I ask, What is a high school student to do when they do not know how to read? Where do they go when none of their teachers know how to teach them something they should have gotten in elementary school? According to the Minnesota Report Card through MDE, in 2022, 26% of Black fourth graders were proficient in reading achievement alone. This is the result of districts doing what they want to do. MDE Communication Director Kevin Burns recently stated that most recent data continue trends that we've seen beginning in 2017 prior to COVID. This is a result of districts doing what they want to do. Ensuring that every Minnesota student can read well at every grade level is critical to closing the opportunity gaps and ending internalized oppression. As a legislative session process unfolds, we ask that the needs of BIPOC students, English language learners, and biliterate students are met during this transition. All students benefit from access to literature that is representative of their culture and celebratory of their humanity. Thank you.
Next testifiers online as well, Charlie.
Hello, my name is Charlie Tyree. I'm an organizer at Educators for Excellence Minnesota and a community organizer in Minneapolis Ward 10. I work with teachers every day, hearing their perspectives on what Minnesota students are facing in our current school climate, and I have some teacher statements to read in support of Bill SF 1273. From former Minneapolis teacher Shannon Mitchell, literacy is by far the most important skill we must give kids, and we are failing. There is no excuse for this, and it's shameful. There are educators who successfully teach kids to read, even those with free and reduced lunch status. It can be done. As a former teacher, I saw the wide variety in training teachers had to address the literacy needs of their students. All educators, but especially those in high poverty schools, should have access to training and support at improving literacy. Next, from St. Paul teacher Katie Sandsmark, this is a very important issue because I work with primarily students of color and EL students. Literacy is severely lacking for many students, and rather than this issue being tackled and solved, it is often ignored. I hear teachers say things like, oh, that student is not a strong reader. They really struggle in this class because they can't access the materials. Because teachers don't have the capacity to teach reading or do reading interventions, in addition to teaching their content areas, these struggling readers get left behind. This needs to change. Every student deserves to be confident in their reading ability, and we can do so much more to support our students. These two teachers are among many of our members that support the READ Act. Data shows that an alarming amount of Minnesota students are not meeting literacy standards today. So today, I'm urging you to pass the READ Act, which allows teachers to learn evidence-based strategies to set up our students for academic success now and in the future. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair and committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Amelia Kelscher, and I am a special education teacher who works with children with learning disabilities, emotional and behavioral disorders, autism spectrum disorder, and developmental cognitive disabilities. I'm here today to show my full support of the READ Act. As a special education teacher, I can say that the science of reading has changed the lives of the students that I teach. I have watched my students' reading abilities, confidence, and attitudes towards school grow in astounding ways. I have seen how students are unlocking the code as they begin to learn reading skills in a systematic way that they can then generalize into the books they are reading in their classrooms. Students are excited about reading once they are equipped with the tools and knowledge they need to master basic skills. I have seen significant growth in students whose achievement scores were the lowest. After 2 years of implementing a reading curriculum based on the science of reading, many of my students are able to access grade level material they were not previously able to. I have even been able to dismiss students from special education services because of the growth that has been made, and I believe that this is because of the science of reading. After 2 years, not only did one of my students meet expectations on their reading MCA, but they scored at the top of their entire grade. The science of reading is life-changing for so many children who need explicit, systematic, and sequential instruction in order to learn to read. It dismays me to hear that people still hold the belief that students with disabilities will never be able to read at grade level and that we should not expect them to. This belief is false. Not only is this untrue, but it is damaging to the children we work with. We should all hold high expectations for every child. We know and understand that it is possible for us to close reading gaps, and that should be our ultimate goal for every student. Lowering our expectations for children causes children to lower expectations of themselves. Practices based on the science of reading are necessary for some and beneficial for all. Thank you.
Thank you. This guy. Malachi Johnson.
My name is Malachi Johnson. I've been teaching for 20 years. I've taught third grade. I've taught reading and math support. I'm currently live in my fifth grade classroom. What we've been doing isn't working, and I see the negative effects daily. What is literacy? Literacy is access. It's access to a better life and the hope of a better future. Literacy is opportunity. It's the opportunity to reach your full potential and become who you want to be. But most important, literacy is civil rights. I'm a huge proponent of using culturally relevant teaching strategies and materials, and I believe that good teaching using the science of reading includes having kids reading culturally relevant texts and using culturally relevant instructional practices when delivering instruction. Science of reading does not cancel a teacher's ability to teach using culturally relevant strategies. Science of reading does not stop a teacher from doing the magic that we do on a daily basis. Our students deserve better than what we've been giving them, and we have the opportunity here to provide students with the tools and access to a better life. Educators need the support and help to start repairing the broken system that we have. The READ Act can be that support. Support for teachers to give students access to high quality reading instruction. With the READ Act, teachers will have the training and tools to support our students and begin to close the large literacy discrepancies we have in Minnesota and provide our students with the opportunities to access the amazing advantages that come from being able to read. I love this quote by Frederick Douglass. It says, "Once you learn to read, you will be forever free." Our students deserve the best, and our teachers deserve the tools to create access and opportunities for the students in Minnesota. I ask you to listen to educators, people in the game, doing the work every day. We look into the kids' eyes and see the amazing things that these kids are capable of. We see the pride kids have when they can read, and I'll tell you from experience, there aren't many things better than that. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Hutchinson's next, online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Peter Hutchinson. At an earlier point in my career, I, like you, served the state of Minnesota as the Commissioner of Finance. Now you call it the Commissioner of Management and Budget. And a few years after that, I became the superintendent of the Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm here in support of SF 1273. If you took all the students in Minnesota that are reading below proficiency, lined them up and had them hold hands, it would stretch from here to Chicago. We have a crisis of unprecedented scale in our literacy in Minnesota, and we need to address it. The consequences are devastating, individually, for families, for communities, the over-identification for special education, the over-participation in suspension and other disciplinary matters, the fact that 70 to 90% of the people that are incarcerated today can't read tells you the consequences of this crisis. I can speak to it personally because when I was in second grade, I was told I couldn't read, effectively telling me I was dumb. When a child hears that, they carry that with them. I carried it with me for years. And the fact is that virtually every single human being can learn to read. The fact that half of our kids are not is not a consequence of something the kids did. It's because they were not given the opportunity. The READ Act addresses that. And I think it can get us where we want to go. But it will not and does not and should not ever blame our teachers for what has happened. Our teachers have been immersed in a system of education that does not work. They didn't choose it. They were immersed in it. The READ Act can help fix that problem if it does 7 things, and I think the READ Act does. First, it makes using evidence-based reading a matter of policy. Secondly, it assures that all new teachers will have a license that means they can use these skills. They have them and can use them effectively. And the programs that prepare them would be required to assure that that's the case. It would support existing teachers in the unlearning and relearning that's going to be necessary and provides them with the coaches that they're going to need to get it done. It needs to encourage every school, because it affects every school, to adopt a curriculum that embraces these same policies. And it needs to provide the resources that schools can acquire the necessary curriculum materials to get the job done. And finally, it ought to provide for the kind of high dosage interventions that are necessary right now for children from K through 12, and in fact, many of our graduates, to allow them to have an opportunity to close those gaps that if we don't address today will become permanent. Finally, we can afford to do this.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchinson.
You've heard already, and my final thing is, don't go small. Take this on, make it, address it in a way that Frederick Douglass would be proud. Thank you.
Okay, last two testifiers, Mr. Uni.
Mr. Chair, while he's coming, this is the answer. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Adosh Uni. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Minnesota Department of Education. I'll keep my comments brief. Thank you to the author for sharing the sense of urgency for addressing our literacy achievement rates in our state. We appreciate the opportunity to connect with the author and advocates to work together to produce bills that both prioritize strategies to best serve our children, families, and communities, especially our most underserved children, and address the resource and professional learning needs of our educators in order to ensure our children learn to read at grade level at every grade. We are working collaboratively toward common goals and aligned priorities so that every child is reading at or above grade level every year, beginning in kindergarten, including multilingual learners and students receiving special education services, by ensuring educators have the supports needed to provide comprehensive, evidence-based reading instruction. Our overall goal is that school leaders and educators must provide evidence-based reading instruction through a multi-tiered system of support by 2027. This morning, MDE had the opportunity to walk through the governor's education budget bill, which contains the bold literacy proposal, which we are extremely excited about. We see many similarities in the READ Act and the governor's language, as well as a few differences. And we look forward to continuing to work with the author for areas of alignment and shared investment. And we truly appreciate our efforts to address this important need. It will take each and every one of us to come together to do what it takes to change this trajectory and ensure we support our educators in making sure that their efforts make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Last testifier. Okay, members.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Duckworth.
Thank you. I don't know if there is somebody here an expert that could answer this question. I'm wondering what the difference is between the science of reading and what evidence-based reading is. And I know that might sound like a dumb question, but.
Hi, I'm Wendy Stitchin, the Associate Director of Literacy at Curie. I think I can help answer that question, and it is not a dumb question. These terms can get very confusing, so let me try to help explain that. So the science of reading is the body of work referred to as science of reading. It's really emerging consensus from related disciplines based on literacy of thousands of studies supported by hundreds of millions of research dollars across the world in many languages. So it's really a body of research. So that's the science of reading. And then your next question was, how is that different from evidence-based literacy practices? Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Yeah. Okay. So evidence-based literacy practices are actually taking the research, the science of reading, right, and then putting those in applicable practices that are used within the classroom.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you. Would some of the methods of teaching literacy in the past also be included under what is considered evidence-based literacy?
Practices such as like 3 cueing system, or could you be a little bit more specific? Which practices?
I will be more specific if I may, Mr. Chair. 3 cueing and specifically the method of literacy training and teaching that the 3 cueing system was a part of.
Yeah, absolutely not. 3 cueing system would not be part of evidence-based practice, evidence-based literacy practices.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Senator, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you to the testifier for her explanation there. Here's the deal. I want to get on board with the big literacy push in our state. We have talked about it at length. We agree on it. I've talked to the author of this bill about it. And the original bill talked about the science of reading at length. I could find it in there a lot. It talked about phonics, fluency, and really doubled down on the science of reading. When I look at this new bill with the amendment, I see the science of reading referenced once, and it has to do with what teachers are taught as they're getting their license, which is good. But then there are other areas in the bill which we have stricken scientifically based reading and replaced it with evidence-based literacy. And there is a portion of the bill that outlines and says that the 3 cueing method system would be a part of what is defined as structured literacy. And so I'm getting a little bit confused and frustrated as to what appeared to be a phenomenal bill that was moving in the right direction, only to now see a version that I think people who testified are maybe confused about, or maybe it's just me, because everybody was here talking about the science of reading and how it's great. And somebody even said that the bill allowed for evidence-based reading or the science of reading, but I don't see an either or in here. What I see on page 2, line 2.29 is scientifically based reading stricken and replaced with evidence-based literacy. And so just for the good of the discussion that we're going to have about literacy as we move forward, is I want to be really clear that we are not shying away from doubling down on the science of reading. And I want us to be crystal clear that we are leaving zero room in our state statute for schools to use the previous methods that have been taught over the years that have now been shown to not work as well as we thought they have. So if we're going to do this and do it right, we've got to be crystal clear about doubling down on what does work, and that is the science of reading and phonics. And we also can't leave any wiggle room at all to still perpetuate or have the methods that have failed students to still be utilized in our classrooms. So, Mr. Chair, this isn't directed at the bill or its author or co-author. It's more directed at the general discussion that we're having as a state and what method we're going to move forward with to help our little kids. Thank you.
Senator.
Mr. Chair, Senator Duckworth, thank you for your question and your concern, and we share that concern. It was probably my fault for saying science of reading or evidence-based in this bill, in the House bill, and there's like 6 different versions of this bill, as you know, that are floating around, and so I was probably looking at the wrong one before the testimony in the Senate, and I apologize. The things that we would point out to you that are in the bill that are putting up the exact guardrails that you are hoping exist. First is the requirement that the Department of Education has to work with Carrie, who is very rooted in making sure that we root out these bad practices. Also, the way evidence-based is defined in the bill matches with science of reading. And this is also an attempt to start moving in the direction of bold literacy as well, because eventually READ Act and bold literacy will have to combine. The reason that it was expanded from science of reading to science of reading or evidence-based or just evidence-based or structured literacy is because any teacher of reading will tell you that while science of reading does great for most everyone, there's still going to be some kids that need additional evidence-based strategies, and we're talking about students with traumatic brain injuries, students with Down syndrome, and these populations may not benefit solely from phonics, and so we want to make sure that those strategies are not outlawed by just writing into statute, you have to do this one thing. If that, it's to give more flexibility in those cases.
Mr. Chair, I find that to be helpful. But again, and maybe there are different versions of the bill floating around. This version doesn't appear to be the either or version. And so I plan to learn more. I'm being open-minded about this, but I'm just getting the concern out there on the front end so that we can hopefully address it or make improvements if it's necessary. Because if this doesn't double down on science of reading and is still going to allow for some of those other methods to be used en masse, maybe not in very specific instances for specific kids, then we will not have addressed the issue in its entirety. Thank you.
Members, anybody else? Senator, final thoughts. And again, we can't thank you enough for stepping up today for one of our colleagues. It is above and beyond the call of duty, so thank you on behalf of all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. You know, as a mom of 5, one still a baby, but my 4 older ones have 3 still in school. One's thank goodness, an adult, have a family of his own, but all my children have struggled with reading in school. As a mom, it was really hard to see them struggle and have challenges. And oftentimes, when I try to teach them, they're like, that's not how my teacher taught me. You know, everybody has their own methods. As a mom, I'm not a teacher, but it was really hard to see my children struggle with reading in school and not know how to help them oftentimes. I think we can do so much better to help our children to succeed in life and to read, and I'm hoping that this bill will do just that. I appreciate all your time, and I welcome you to be part of improving this bill and open to discussions outside of committee. Thank you.
So this bill will be going to Education Finance. And all those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you for indulging, going over a little bit. Everybody, members of the team and audience members, thanks for coming. We adjourn.